Welcome back, everybody, to the Card Chatter with Refractor Jones and Bobbles and Ball Cards. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend out there. Hope your NFL teams did wonderful. If your baseball teams are in the playoff hunt, hopefully that's going well for you. As of this moment, we are recording this Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Refractor is getting a nice suntan at 5 p.m. over in the Vegas time area. He's sitting there chilling, relaxing, got the sun beating down on him. But anyway, as we have been starting the show, big shout out to Mason and Team Mason with Mason's Mission. Pop that QR code up on the screen if you are able and willing. Yes, I know it is October 2nd, but we said we were going to continue to support it because every month should be awareness on childhood cancer. So let's try to help Mason out. If you're unable to financially, don't worry, just pop us over a little simple free subscribe on that subscribe button and we will donate for you. So anyway, we always like to do Monday's episodes. This is episode 19. We always like to do with a little bit of water cooler talk. You got the NFL games going on. As of this moment at 8 p.m., Judge hasn't hit 62 yet, but he has tied Maris. So congratulations to him. Got some playoff teams. Seattle, first time since 2001 that they're making the playoffs. I was actually having a conversation with a guy who's a big Mariners fan. I was like, kind of funny. They changed the playoff format, added a team in, and Seattle's in the playoffs. Wonder if they would have made it without that. But anyway, how are you doing, sir? I'm going to get into some scores real quick, but I know you got some things you want to talk about after the scores. So I know you haven't probably looked at much of the football scores because you've had a pretty busy weekend that we will let you touch on. But anything you want to say before I get into the NFL scores?
Nope. Hello, and I'm ready to hear it. Throw me some scores.
Throw you some scores. All right. Well, as you already know, the Dolphins lost Thursday night. Tua got his neck all snapped up, and that whole concussion debacle thing is going on there. But Bengals beat the Dolphins on Thursday night. Minnesota played New Orleans. Minnesota won 28-25. That was an early game today. Atlanta wound up beating Cleveland. There was a bunch of close games this week. It was very odd. But Atlanta beat Cleveland 23-20. If I remember seeing that right, Atlanta had a bigger lead and Cleveland came back. There was a theme this week that we will you'll notice here. But Buffalo wound up beating Baltimore 23-20. Same score as the last game, if you notice, and another 3-point game. Baltimore was actually up 20-3 in this game. And Lamar threw an interception. I said the Ravens wound up Seahawking themselves. It was like the 2-yard line, 4th down. And I was all cool with them going for it, but I thought they would have ran like a read option where Lamar had he could read the defense and either hand it off to maybe Dobbins or something up the middle. And if that wasn't there, he could, roll out and do a little rollout to the outside. But instead, they went to throw the ball and he threw an interception. And Buffalo went down and took the lead and won the game. Anyway, Washington lost to Dallas 25-10. So even Washington cannot beat Dallas with a backup quarterback. No surprise there. Big scoring game here, but it was a 3-pointer. Seattle and Detroit. Seattle was kicking Detroit's butt pretty good, but Detroit made it a close game. Seattle wound up winning 48-45. If you took the over, whatever the points over was, you probably covered because I doubt anybody in Vegas, Mars, the moon, anywhere would have chosen 93 points scored between Seattle and Detroit. But anyway, wow. Here we are. The Chargers, Houston. Chargers wound up winning that 34-24. Tennessee beat Indianapolis 24-17. The Giants continue their decent season. I believe they're now 3-1 on the year. They beat Chicago 20-12. Then you take it Jacksonville, Philadelphia. Jacksonville was up early on Philly. I believe it was 14-0. and Philadelphia ended up coming back winning 29-21. The New York Jets. I don't know when the last time both New York teams won, but the New York Jets beat Pittsburgh. And
in Pittsburgh
yeah,
too, right? They were in Pittsburgh.
they were
I
in
think.
Pittsburgh, and the Jets beat Pittsburgh 24-20. Trubisky was benched in for Kenny Pickett to start the second half.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep, and Kenny Pickett went 10 of 13 for 120 yards, but he had 3 interceptions. So,
I mean, that's to be expected.
Yeah, his first pass was actually an interception, but all 3 of his incomplete passes were actually completed just to the guys in the wrong jerseys.
Yeah,
So
right.
he was 13 of 13, just, the 3 of them were to the wrong team. So,
well, I mean, at least he's getting his chance. I'd rather see Pickett in there than Trubisky.
Then we go into the later games. Arizona beat Carolina 26-16. Here's another interesting one here. Mac Jones obviously is injured. He suffered an injury in the Baltimore game. Brian Hoyer started out the game for New England. I don't know where this decision came from. I didn't watch the game, but I heard about the transaction that happened. I don't know if he got hurt or what, but Hoyer started out 5 of 6 for 37 yards. But Bailey Zappe, I think is how you pronounce his name, Zappe, he came into the game, and he went 10 of 15, 99 yards and a touchdown. They actually took Green Bay to overtime. Green Bay pulled it out 27-24. But on the strength of Bailey Zappe, the Patriots took Green Bay to overtime. So that was an interesting one. And
so
then
we got a soccer player now playing quarterback for the.
I might be butchering his last name. I don't know. It's Zappe. So I'm thinking it's Zappe. I don't know. But anyway, and then Vegas, they wound up beating Denver, which is kind of surprising. Denver's not they're not doing too hot now. They're 2-2 with Russ. But Vegas beat Denver 32-23. So that is your NFL rundown for week 4. It kind of sucks as a Ravens fan, but I was talking to some guys at halftime. At half, the Bills scored just before half to make it 20-10. And, there was a guy in the chat, and he was like, I think it's still in the Ravens' favor. Murky field, the rainy weather. We've had rain all weekend up here with Lamar Jackson and stuff. And I was like, yeah, but it all depends on that clock management. And sure enough, man, the first 2 times Ravens had the ball, they only took 4 minutes off the clock. 2 drives, and they only, took 4 minutes off. And Buffalo wound up coming back, tying it up. They scored 10 points, made it 20-20. And at that point, I was just like, this doesn't shock me at all, And then they moved the ball pretty well. But again, they got down and kind of Seahawked themselves, and Lamar threw an interception, and that was the end of that. So, but you had an exciting weekend. Let's talk about that a bit. I know you were at the Industry Summit out there in Vegas. People have spoken on a hot button topic lately has been how card shows are, mostly with dealers and pricing and comps and stuff like that. I've heard different stories of folks that have attended the Industry Summit in the past, and we spoke briefly, what was that, Friday evening? So why don't you key us in a little bit on what the Industry Summit is and how the show and everything is?
Well, I mean, the Industry Summit is just basically a good old boys club. These small time shows that, well, let me just say, they're not even shows, because the showroom is like a small little ballroom. It might as well be a 3-bedroom house. For these darn shows, they're absolutely ridiculous. They have no space in there. There's not enough dealers. They just need to stop selling it as a card show. if you're just going to do it to bring in guys, to your cronies, and to bring in people to party and to, to network and that type of stuff, just call it a network session and stop throwing a card show into it, because I'm just, and of course, I was a former Beckett guy, but this is terrible. Right? These are just not good at all. I mean, they do nothing for the average collector there. It's basically guys that, like I said, that all belong to the good old boys club that hang out every night. And I mean, truly, I couldn't wait to be done. Like I told you, I ended up driving, my box van. So this way, because I had extra bench seating in there, so I can haul around, all my buddies and stuff like that. And of course, they're going to end up hearing this and they're going to get mad at me for saying this, but I am who I am. These shows just do not make any kind of sense for the average collector. None at all. And you're charging $10 to get into something that has no real value to a collector.
So is it more like maybe a conference than a show? Like, is there speakers going on, like presentations going on, that sort of thing, and like just some people are set up to have some cards maybe to sell as a show, or
right? It's exactly what you just said. They'll have people where they honor people in the industry who've been in the industry for a long time. But the problem is, the people that have been in the industry for a long time, they're just honoring the same people over and over again. You know what I mean? There's like no diversity, and it's just, it makes no sense. To me, I would rather have 50 new guys that you're talking about, or just 50 different people, instead of bringing the good old boys club back together. And that's what it is. And
so it's like a Hall of Fame. It's like a Hall of Fame ceremony where the same players are inducted each year.
Yeah, I mean, you get these speaking engagements where they bring guys in, who basically have to portray themselves as industry leaders in the market, and these guys are guys that have outside jobs besides being in the industry themselves. It makes no sense. I mean, when you're fishing for people, you might as well just call it, what it is. Like I said, it's the good old boys network. If they would say, hey, look, let's go out and scout and find us everybody who's been in the hobby for 20 plus years. Let's put some panels together and let's invite these people out, for 3 days, 4 days, whatever. And let's put panels together and let's throw them out there online, stream them so everybody can see them. It's not to where you have to pay X amount of dollars to come because that's what it is. It's all about making the money. And for me, the card show itself, I feel like the only reason why they do the card show is to generate that money at the door, and plus the actual the hotel revenue and everything for the spot. So this way they can pay for all the cronyism, garbage that they're doing. It makes no sense, for the average collector. It's not a fun time. It hasn't been in a long time. And, for the last 2 years it's been here. And thank God I've not had to travel to it, because there's no way. I mean, if this ever moves, because it used to be in Hawaii, and if this ever moves, there's no way I'll ever go. I just won't do it because it's not worth it. Next week's show that we have here, the Las Vegas Card Show, there'll be at least 300 plus tables. Big show, heavily attended. You'll have PWCC there. You have BSA there. You're going to have all these big companies that are going to be there, and they're going to support that show because, one, there's a lot of people there, and they know they're going to get people through that door. Through this industry summit, you got to pay $10 just to walk through the door, and you sneeze and you've seen everything. It's just it's terrible.
So
I'm not a poo-poo guy, so this upsets me to even say this, but it's just not good.
So as a card show, it's not necessarily a card show. It's just a conference with cards.
Yeah, it's not really.
Is there a good attendance though? Like, do people attend that show, so to speak, or is it known, like, okay, this is more just a conference. You're going there to maybe get information on the corporate side or try, like, there's been rumor going around all weekend, and we kind of touched a little bit on it, that there was supposed to be some massive announcement going on. And I haven't heard anything yet. I would have thought that if this was a corporate conference type thing, hey, it might be the place to do it. But nothing's came out yet, to my knowledge. I know you had said you hadn't heard anything.
No,
So it's kind of
I was hanging, with the right people. So because I sent over the guys to go watch the Knights game. I got them all tickets. So I had 8 guys with me. Sent them over there, watched the game. They all came back. Today they were at the Raiders game. I had tickets for all the Raiders games. So I got those guys all lined up for that as well. None of them, even knew anything, of any kind of sniffles that what was going to be announced or if anything was going to happen at all this weekend. And truly, this is not. It bugs me to even be the negative Nancy here today because Beckett has been dropping the ball now for 2+ years. And well, I mean, should we expect anything different? That the industry summit's going to be something special? I mean, there's just no value there for the average collector, and that bugs me because that's me. I'm the average collector. At least I think I am. That's how I've always portrayed myself, and I've always carried myself. And for, like I said, the average collector who's going to walk into a stupid show that you got to pay $10 a piece for, and you walk up two aisles and it's done. I mean,
so outside of the show, is there anything of value with any of this, like any of the panels, or is it mostly just like regurgitated information and, like you said, people just like praising the same folks over and over again about likely the same thing over and over again? Is it maybe it, because what I'm getting from this, and I've never been to it, just
You're not missing
talking to
anything.
you and you being there, it almost sounds like if you work for a company and they call you in as like say you work for a big company and they call an all employee meeting after the quarterly numbers have been ran, and they tell you, okay, hey, we made $10 million this quarter, congratulations, thank you all. And it's almost like, is it that kind of thing? They're like, okay, well, Joe Blow here of XYZ Corporation did this for the company or for the card market over the past year. And then next year it'll be the same thing. Joe Blow did something else, but so it's just keep regurgitating the same recognition of the same people. Is that kind of what I'm getting from this?
Yeah, and plus they're bringing all the influencers in and that type of stuff, and it's just not something that is enjoyable at all to the average collector. Next week will be the big week for the average collector.
So rewinding back a couple episodes when we did, does corporate presence at a card show like help your card show experience kind of thing? That's kind of what you're touching on here. Is the industry summit is basically that corporate presence, and it's not it's 80-20 maybe corporate presence to card show, and
90, not like
90-10.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like what we touched on in that that episode was like, if we go to a card show, we want the cards. We want to deal with the dealers and the value boxes and looking at showcases and stuff. And so this sounds like the complete opposite. This is the middle of the national at a card show with the dealers that might be up against the wall. So that's kind of what I'm taking from it. So
for me, this is a lot like, hey, we're gonna bring you out to Vegas and everybody gets together and we all have a good time and we do our thing. Out of the 8 guys that that I consider friends that I've had long term in the hobby and stuff like that, and again, I know a couple of them actually listen to our podcast, so I don't want them to think that I'm speaking bad of them, but a couple of these guys didn't even want to come over to the house and hang out at the house, and because there were some new things, I had some new game worn jerseys that I actually acquired that I wanted to show a couple guys that were jersey collectors and stuff like that, but they didn't want to be away from the strip area because of course they wanted to go gamble and hang out and drink, and it was their weekend away to be away from the wives and that kind of stuff. So it was like, oh, let's just hang out up here. And like I've told you, I'm from here. I have no interest in hanging out at the casino and doing that kind of stuff. That's like me going to Atlantic City. It's the same thing. It makes no sense that, for me to go into a casino.
So overall, outside of the bad like show vibe, and it sounded like it wasn't the greatest of weekends for the hobby or card shows or whatever. But
No.
was there anything you could share that you took away from it, that like might be some information that listeners may want to know about, or
Yeah,
um
don't waste your money coming to the industry summit. I mean, there's no point. You know, and again, I'm so sorry for doing this because you know me, man. I am not a poo-poo guy, and right now I'm being the biggest sour poo-poo in the world. But really, truly, this is not. It's an expense. Imagine if you're on the East Coast coming out here, and you're coming out here for this because you feel that, hey, I've been hearing all kinds of stuff about this industry summit, and I'm going to go to it, and I'm going to go, you know, listen to the panelists, and yeah, there's nothing there for you. Truly, it's all about the cronyism that's held within the one percenter circle, and like I said, it just keeps getting regurgitated. That that was kind of a thing that we had talked about, last in our last episode, and one of my friends actually ended up mentioning it. He was like, you know what? That's the one thing I respect about you, Alex, is that you refused to sit there and try to throw anything on top of yourself to try to make yourself look good. And I respect that you don't put your face out there and you're trying to sell anything right now. You're just talking about the hobby because you love the hobby. And and that's the problem with these kind of things, because you're not adding any kind of value for the average collector. And if somebody is spending $1,000 or whatever to come out here from the East Coast and they're here for 2 days, well, what kind of value do they have that? There's casinos everywhere. If you really want to go gamble or something, right? I mean, what's the big deal about coming to Vegas? There really isn't any.
so basically they're like, I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, what are the panels for? Like, what do they share anything
How,
about upcoming
yeah,
future plans, or
no,
like,
they generally don't release anything like that. It's about, hey, how to run a card shop. How do you do your online sales? It's like going to eBay U. You go to the eBay U conference, and it's the basic one percenters that are there that are the $1 million sellers, and they sit there and talk about each other and pat each other on the back. I mean, you, I don't like that. You know what I mean? Everybody's the same to me, and everybody should be treated the same. And I don't I don't really care for that whole thing of, hey, I'm more popular than you, and because I'm popular, this is how it goes, and you should listen to me. It's just not right. This is how the hobby gets misconstrued, because people are told, buy this because I know what I'm talking about. Stop. Just just stop the nonsense. It's just crazy,
is
and people
this?
have to stop feeding into it and wholeheartedly accepting it. Anybody that has, and again, here I am coming out as a poo-pooer here. I just feel that stuff that's getting thrown out there on YouTube and social media in general, it's there's always something behind it to make a dollar, instead of just being a hobbyist and talk about the hobby and enjoy the hobby. If we had, you know 200 or even 1,000 plus guys and gals that would just start doing a podcast or even YouTube videos, where they all get together and they just talk about the hobby that they love, with no money agenda behind it to try to make money, you know how strong this hobby would be. Because the money would always follow. It always does. But they don't seem to understand that. They always want to get that quick rich scheme in to cash in as quick as possible and then move on to the next one.
Yeah,
It's
that is
silly.
definitely something, like, even with the growth of the hobby, like, it's a double-edged sword, right? We talk about growing the hobby and everything, but when the hobby grows, then there's complaints of there's not enough wax out there or what have you, because the demand has risen. And then so the manufacturers try to appease that by printing more product. and which case is beneficial for them because then they can make more money. But then at the same time, we're like, you hear the people in the hobby say, well, there's not enough wax, and then they print more wax, and then it reverts back to, oh, they printed too much wax, and now the stuff isn't worth anything. So it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario sometimes, because like that balance of, trying to, I guess it's one of those things, you can't make everybody happy. And
Yeah.
yeah, it would be awesome if people like all collected, but we know that isn't the uh the interest level in it. And this is some things that I've like talked about, with people privately, or have spoken on in videos and that sort of thing. Like I actually, I think it was JJ and Sean. I was talking to them earlier today, and going over discussing some stuff about shows and this and that. And um, I said, there's something very interesting that I would really love to know. If the pandemic never happened, what would the hobby look like today? Like, there's so much talk about how card values have decreased and everything because people came in and they seen the peaks of like the Jordan hitting 100 or 840,000 or 860,000. And then it dropped down, and, it's lost like 670 some $1,000 or whatever. I had a chart that I drew up, but, I took 5 cards that went insanely crazy just from a period of February 2020 to February 2021. And they
Hmm.
grew substantially in price. But then obviously, we all know none of that is ever sustainable. Like anybody that knows anything about any market out there knows that when a rapid, like astronomical growth happens, it's not going to be sustainable. There's something behind it that's making this happen, and
Yep.
it's going to come back to earth. It's going to decline. But there's so much emphasis on how much the cards have lost over their peak price that nobody is looking at the fact that the 86 Fleer Jordan PSA 10 is still up over $100,000, like
Yeah.
from what it
Everything.
was in.
Yeah. Everything still is. Everything is basically up from what it was.
Yeah, so, but so many people like focus, they hyper focus on the loss. Like, and what
Yeah.
the discussion started up was the Marvel stuff. The PMGs exceeded, that set went up to like 100,000, and now it's recessed back to like 10 grand or whatever it is. We know
Hmm.
that things happen, markets get pushed, cards, products, players, whatever, they get pushed up, and then they, somebody like you said, they jump out, they jump to something else, and then they're going to go to something else, and then it'll recess back down. But the likelihood is it's still stronger than it was before it was pushed to begin with. So it's not that it lost money. It just lost money if you bought it at the wrong time.
Right.
If you had a Jordan in February 2021 or February 2020 that you bought for like 34 grand in a PSA 10, well, you're still like very happy you bought that card for 34,000. You might be pissed off
Sure.
you didn't sell it when it was 800,000, but at the same time, you're still up, right? So I
Right.
think that's some of the funny thing within the hobby is like there's so much focus on the negative that people overlook the positive,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of positives still here with card prices down. In fact, it benefits everybody, I feel, when the prices are more normalized. If we could get wax I don't even mind if wax is up a little bit over 2019 or 2020 prices. I don't, I understand they supplies and all that, increase, and they have to pay a little bit more, and labor costs and all that stuff. I get that. Um, but I think that we're at a point now, like where prison boxes used to be $150 and now they're $1,500. I think a 10x is kind of like excessively increasing. So, I think if wax would adjust a little bit. I think we still need a little bit of adjustments in grading. I actually, just before we popped on here to record this, dropped a video. I compared the last quarter, July, August, September numbers to April, May, June numbers to go quarter by quarter analysis on what the companies were doing. And there is no secret out there. PSA is a freaking monster. Um, they keep growing their numbers more and more and more. But it's nice to have options as well and not be stuck in a corner. So that I like looking at overall numbers, even even when I look at grading numbers, obviously I do it because, you know, I do bulk submissions and stuff, and I enjoy grading and all that. But I also like looking at it in an overall to see where the landscape of the hobby is. Are people, you know, is the demand still strong for all the companies, or has it tapered off? You know, you can learn a lot by looking into numbers, and it's interesting that like that the industry summit to me, I almost feel like why don't they just do it as a broadcasted video where people don't have to travel out there to hear the panels? Like, why don't they just record the panels and like do do a channel or something? I mean, I know probably it's creating revenue and everything, they're getting a bit out of it, but I
Mm.
think, you know, if it's not so much card show and it's more, uh, you know, panel and conference type information, maybe it's not needed to have its an entire weekend event over it in like a show format, and just keep that to, as you quoted them, the good old boys club, and let them hang out and do their thing and share it with everybody else, you know, instead of like,
I mean, that's basically what that was. You know, every year in Hawaii back in the day, the Kit Young, Hawaii show was basically like the industry summit, where everybody would get together, and it was the good old boys club, and everybody would, shake hands, switch envelopes, and it was like meeting in Switzerland of world leaders, is what it was basically in the 80s, and through the old Kit Young shows. So, and I know that a lot of people didn't live through that era because most of the people in the hobby now are 30 and below. I mean, there are older people in the hobby, but a lot of the younger generation is coming to the hobby and they have no clue. They have no clue of the cons that have always been in this hobby. And
well, let me ask you something.
But
So you mentioned the average collector, and then you mentioned like even the younger or like even the older, like, you know, 35, 40, 50-year-old people. Do you think part of it isn't that they just didn't pay attention to it, or could it just be somewhat that they just didn't care? Like, I know there's people that also get hyper focused in the cons and the scams and all of that, and they try to call it out. And there's hobby heroes that think they're going to be saviors of everything. But at the end of the day, the majority of the hobby isn't paying attention to any of that stuff anyway. It's not affecting them. Like, you know, if a Jordan PSA 10 gets ran up or manipulated up in value, it's not affecting probably 99% of the people in the hobby because they're not looking for a PSA 10 86 Fleer anyway. So do you
right.
think it's just the people just weren't paying attention? It wasn't necessarily that they didn't know about it. They just didn't even care about it, so to speak. Could that be part of it?
Yes and no, but here's my real outlook on it. 95% of the collectors in that are in this hobby are not the one percenter kind of club. They're the average Joe that just buys their player, their team, their type of card that they like, whatever. Those 5 percenters that where you see those big astronomical numbers that are paid for, these cards are only switching hands between maybe at 10 guys out of 100. So out of, let's say, 90 of those guys, they're like us, they're average Joe collectors. And I'm saying average Joes that don't go out and spend $500,000 on a card. How many people that go out and spend $500,000 on a card?
Um, I could count it on one hand.
Yeah, I know legitimately of two people that I've seen them make, six-figure purchases on cards, and and they only bought it to flip it out. That's it. That was the only reason for them to buy it, because that's what these guys do. They don't. When you have that kind of money, it's just about making a bigger amount of money. So it's not because you enjoy the hobby. So that's why I think like these summits and this type of stuff, it doesn't it's just not real constructive to the average collector. To me, if
So,
you brought in a bunch of just average Joes and said, hey, you know what? And that's something that Beckett should do. Beckett should just say, hey, look, let's get back to our roots, back to the collector, like when they first started out, because remember, they did push PSA pretty hard. and they, in the scene, they were almost dead neck and neck. And sometimes a lot of people favored Beckett over using PSA. So, for them to just completely fall off like they have, I mean, they're just, they're just not my cup of tea. I wish somebody would take over the company and bring it back to life.
So this industry summit, and I'm trying to remember because is this the one where like Tops sometimes has the cards that you could get? Um, there's some conference I know they do it on. I want to say it was the industry summit, but I can't remember. Like
Yeah,
Tops will have autograph cards, and they might be numbered out of like 10 or 5 or something like that.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
they give out some kind
Everybody,
of cards there?
yeah, they do the same thing. The Panini does, they're like their silver packs and stuff like that. But I mean, all that's it's all washed down. You know what I mean? How many cards numbered out of 10, serial numbered, you're gonna get that are just dead common stuff? And not everybody gets
Well,
them because
I
again,
was
that goes all to
wondering.
the cronyism stuff.
So I just remembered and I thought it was the industry summit. I can't remember if it's that one that I'm thinking of, but there was they would have autographed or patch autos or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
it would specify it was from I think it's the industry summit. I can't remember, but speaking on and the reason I asked that is you mentioned Beckett, and then I was thinking it was the Tops cards I used to see. The whole announcement thing that was supposed to happen this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing a little bit of digging on the internet, and something clicked with me on a couple things I've seen, and I don't know if there's any connection to it or not. But so when I called Tops asking about like redemptions, and I asked about a card that had the same number from Series 1 to Series 2 on an autograph, but it didn't state whether or not the autograph was from Series 1 or Series 2. But they were like the player had autos in both sets and both series and everything. I asked them how they determined that because it wasn't specified on the back of the card whether it was Series 1 or Series 2, even though the card was in both products. And they told me, well, we just go by whatever Beckett said. And I found that very interesting because they're the manufacturer. But then I got to digging around and I was on Fanatics website, who obviously now owns Tops. And I was on looking at job openings for Fanatics and all of the various different entities that they're involved in. And they have a lot of job openings for positions within Tops. And I found it very interesting that many of the positions are located in Dallas, Texas. Is there some sort of connection with Tops and Beckett? Are they some sort of in some form of weird way merged together or connected in any way or anything
No,
like that? Because I found that very interesting because I thought Tops was like New York based and Florida based. And then when I was looking at all this, it was like job openings in Texas, Dallas, Texas.
yeah, no, they have positions everywhere. It was just like Upper Deck. I mean, Upper Deck had places here. They had actual locations here in Vegas and then of course in California and you're like, well, if you're a California-based company, why are you having a warehouse and out there? So what they do is they have drop ship locations is what they have. So when a manufacturer produces enough stuff, they need to be able to say, okay, if I'm in Texas and I need to ship some product going one way or the other, it can go quick, and this is pre, major distributors that they use because a lot of the companies were direct sales only, that's just the way it was. And then when distributors came in, that kind of changed and that kind of stuff. So to me, they're definitely not linked together, like in business
I,
together or anything.
yeah, I was just curious because I seen Dallas, Texas, and I knew that's kind of where Beckett was located. And some
Mm.
of the positions was like one of them I thought was funny, but I also thought it would be cool at the same time. It was a relic cutter position where you cut the relics out for the cards. Like they had all
That
kinds of
would
positions on there.
that would just suck. I
Yeah,
would
it
hate
would
that
suck, but it would
position.
also be kind of fun to see the process.
Can you imagine you've got a Will Chamberlain game worn jersey right there in front of you, and and your job is to take a tap and die and hit it and cut out a piece of that jersey. A piece of me would
Yeah.
die every little piece I hacked out of that jersey. That would just kill me. You couldn't pay me enough
I
money to
seen
do that
that.
though.
That was one of them. And I was like, you know, I don't know that I would want to do that 8 hours a day, every day, or how many hours a day they
No,
work. I was like, but at the same time, it'd be kind of cool to actually see the process and like, you know, especially being in the, being in the hobby and loving the hobby and everything and just seeing how the process works. Cause there's so many speculations. I actually made a joke tonight because of the whole, Panini always putting on there this relic or the material enclosed on the front of this card is not associated with any player, game, event, season, yada yada. And I'm like, well, if the deal happens, if Fanatics does buy them, they could simply just put the relic on the front of this card was from Fanatics and just leave it at that. So
yeah.
it was just kind of a joke. Instead of having to put that it's not associated with anything, they could just put their own brand on there. It's from Fanatics.
We printed it, but we didn't even bother sewing it together, so we didn't even have to cut it. We
Official
skipped that
Fanatics
step.
material.
Yep.
So was there anything like, I know you said the show was pretty small. Was there any like did you notice that like was prices good? Been hearing a lot of talks
No.
that dealers are way overpriced.
Yeah, pricing was not good, and that's why I said next week. I'm telling you, it's going to be a good show here. This Las Vegas is the second one. This Las Vegas card show. They did one last year, and this will be the second one. And they did it right the first one. I mean, they had great turnout. They had guys from the Midwest, all over the West Coast, and a lot of East Coast guys came out. And I know that a lot of East Coast guys are coming. And again, I'm not affiliated with this show whatsoever. They're not giving me anything to say anything. I'm speaking as a hobbyist. If you want to come to a good show, last year's show of this show, the Las Vegas Collectible Show, was fantastic. And it sure as heck will be good again, guaranteed, because they do a really good job about promoting it and actually getting people through the door, and the value. It's remarkable. I mean, they've got guys there with energy drink companies that are giving you away free cases of energy drinks. I mean, who does that? I mean, I've never been to another card show where I can go.
The National had Wi-Fi at $80 a day. I mean,
Oh yeah,
what
that's
more you
great.
want?
I mean, it's the first time I've ever seen an energy drink company sitting there giving away cases to anybody that walked up. You didn't have to have 10,000 followers on Instagram or anything like that. You came up and you started talking to them. Hey, do you want? And of course, I'm not mentioning their name because I don't want people to think that I'm throwing out free advertising or anything like that. That there's any bias or anything
not
like that.
Sponsored.
Yeah, because anything that we ever do, if we ever do any kind of sponsorship stuff, it's going to be directly related to Mason's mission. So when that time comes, if we're ever blessed that we're able to acquire anybody to do to sponsor us or anything like that, any of that money goes directly to Mason's mission. We're not in this to make money. We're in this to actually make the hobby grow and to help the hobbyists enjoy the hobby more.
And just because, like we said before, we're just two guys that like both of us can talk, and we love talking about the hobby, different topics, hopefully helping people, sharing information. I just to veer off the show thing a little bit, and I do want to ask you real quick before I do though, what is your feelings on why? Like there's a big vibe right now, big talk, and it's happened in the past. Like we've heard this before. I guess like in 2021 when things started dropping, everybody was, every time you hear about a show and the answer was, oh, it was a bore show, the dealers are overpriced and everything. We're hearing that a lot more again. And my thinking is we're in a stage right now where people like if the dealers aren't sustained, and what I mean by sustained, if they're not veteran dealers, right? If they haven't been in the hobby a while, they're likely underwater on most of their inventory. They got
Yeah.
in, they needed to boost their inventory, and now pretty much everything they have, they're underwater on. And
Yeah.
when you're dealing on both sides of the table, the buyer wants the W and the dealer wants the W. You know, the dealer's going to want to make above comps so they can say they won, and the buyer wants to be below comps because they want to say they won. And we're just at a period right now where buyers are trying to find any lane to buy something cheap to be able to flip it, because the opportunities, you know, they're out there, but you got to hunt for them. And when people are flipping, they want it to be the easiest way possible. On the opposite end of the table, you have the dealers who know what they're into a card for. They know what the value of it is right now. They know what the comps are, but they're hoping that they can get somebody that wants that card enough that's going to pay them to where they're not losing as much, right? And then you have the other end of it, the people that have, you know, they're not dealers at shows. They're like, well, you know, they're wasting money setting up at a show, but they're not selling anything, so they're losing money. Well, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, both sides can't win. Like, it's not when everything was going up, up, up. You know, a dealer was in 2021 and 2020 when everything was just shooting to the moon. A dealer could buy a card at one show, and by next show the card had went up, and then the buyer would buy the card knowing that, you know, a week later it would be even more than it was that they paid for it. That's not today's market. That's not the normalcy of sports cards. And so now it's like both sides are pulling, you know, they're playing tug of war, trying to figure out who can get the W.
Hmm.
Is that a feeling that you're getting? Because, you know, I know you talk to
Yeah.
dealers and you attend the shows and other things. Could that be a big stranglehold that we're on right now?
Yeah, it's absolutely it's exactly what's going on. See, most dealers they have $10 into a card, and they want 11 or 12 out of the card, and even though the card's worth 7 now, you know what I mean, and that's the kind of stuff of, take the loss, take that L, and move on, and just get in, get out of it. The times have changed. Times now are reverting back to the way cards used to be.
Hmm.
When you looked at the Beckett and the card said it was worth $10, you could go to any show and guaranteed it was there for $5, no matter what. And more often than not, it was $3 to $4 what you were buying that card for. You weren't even paying the $5 because $5 was the competitive number that everybody shared. So everybody was cutting each other's throat. Now everybody's so far, deep underwater because they've spent this big money. So they're like, hell, I can't do anything but hope to heck that somebody is going to trade me out something here that I can sell in my market to try and make up my losses. And and to me, that's right now, as a collector, if you're going to sell to a dealer, you have to expect that you're not getting 80% of comps, even though they want to get minimum 80%. If you're getting anywhere between 50 to 60% on a comp, be happy with that because they're just holding product. They're not really making money. There is no
Yeah.
money. The only people that are making money are consignment houses and consignment auctioneers that are selling in volume, and they're taking their wins in small numbers because those small numbers add up to big numbers. And if the common person, the common dealer would see that, say, hey, you know what, let me take my small wins because they're going to add up to big wins, then they would be better off. But again, they get worried about losing, $3 to $5 on a card that they had, for 6+ months now. And if you're calling yourself a dealer, you got to get out of it. I mean, me as a liquidator, I know for a fact that when I have a product and it's run its course and I've bought so much of it and I see that it's still being produced, which this resonates real well with the card industry, and I still see the item still being produced, there's only going to be an X amount of time that I'm going to be able to sell that item at that peak market, at that peak number. So each day that goes on, that number comes down a little bit more, and people need to understand that, and they don't, So
Right. That's kind of like where I went with, like, you know, I I don't see myself as a dealer, but you know, I sell cards, and you know, it's how I try to fund my hobby.
mhm.
And like for 2020, it's funny if you look at my 2021 numbers to my 2022 numbers, I didn't sell that many cards in 2021. what I actually did was got out of the cards that went absolutely stupid, that I knew opportunity existed there to cash out of those cards. You know, they may not have
Mhm.
even been stuff that I purchased originally thinking that I wanted to sell. It was, this makes sense to go ahead and let it go, because likelihood later on it's going to come back to where I was at on it, and I can make a little bit of extra money plus likely rebuy it later on and have best of both worlds type thing. So
Mhm.
I didn't sell that many cards, but if you compare numbers for numbers, like I think over the past month, my transactions were almost as much over the last month as I had for all of 2021. And the reason being, I went to the lower end stuff. Like when I realized the plain white envelope thing, I started selling them under $20 cards. Those $2, $8, $10 cards. And those things move so easy. And also,
Mhm.
I'll be honest, when I'm on eBay and I'm like looking to list my card and I want to know how much it's selling for, I'm cool with, all right, if the last one sold for 5.99 plus 4.50 shipping and, you know, was just under 10 bucks, well, if I'm doing it at $1 shipping, I know I can put my price at like, you know, $5, and it's likely going to move because someone's actually going to be saving like 3 or 4 bucks because I'm not charging the $4 to $5 shipping on it. So
Right.
that's kind of how I've been moving things. And some of the stuff I sell is cards that people probably wouldn't even think anybody would buy. I mean, you talk
Right.
about cards that are highly produced. I sold a 89 Hoops David Robinson today. How many of those exist out there? And it's raw.
Are you-
You
You're
know?
kidding me. Really?
Somebody bought an 89 Hoop. Somebody bought a 2015 Topps Chrome Darrell Revis off of me. And I don't list anything under $2. I figure $2 is a good sweet spot because I can list, 10 or 15 of those easily in an hour. And if I do 10 of them at $2 a piece, that's $20, And if I can sell all of it, then that would be $20 an hour. I'm cool with, I'm cool with doing that. Um, and that's kind of like where I'm at, but nothing less than $2 a card. Um, so I think right now you just have to shift. And you mentioned, if somebody paid $5 for a card or $10 for a card, instead of selling it for $5 now, they're trying to minimize their losses. I think it's even higher than that. I think a lot of these people are like, they paid $1,000 for a card that's like $300 now. And so they're
Yeah.
wanting $700. And the
Right.
buyer's like, well, I'm not paying you double the recent sale. And the seller's like, well, I'm not taking 75% losses. So like they're just,
Yeah.
knotted up. And they have to understand that $1,000 card likely isn't going to regain to $1,000. I mean,
It won't. Yeah.
there's,
There's no
yeah,
way.
yeah, you talked about,
That's why you get out of it and go and just move on.
right, right. Put that, if you're in it to kind of to prospect or speculate or flip or whatever, the best thing, like if I was in this scenario, so let's say I spent $1,000 on a card and today it's $400. My best case scenario would be, okay, let's take the 400 cash out. Then let's try to split that 400 and minimize my risks by going after maybe 8 $50 cards or $400 cards and see if I can take a lower margin card that might have a small amount of gain to it. Like if you bought 4 different cards that were $100 a piece, hopefully maybe they can get a nudge to 125, right? Then you cash
Yeah.
those out and you regained $100 off of that. So then your
Right.
400 is back up to 500 and try to slowly regain what you were at on that 1,000. It's going to take you a little bit longer, but there is ways to recoup, those lost funds.
Right.
Um,
But
and it's
again,
not going to look
everybody
like
wants.
profit, but
But you know what the problem is, Bubbles? Everybody wants that quick hit. Instead of looking at the market as what it is, whatever the going rate is on a card, it's no different than we're talking about precious metals. If the precious metals price are at this number, then you know you have to buy at that number. It is what it is. Just
right,
accept that, and and just counter move, make a counter move to address that issue. We can't always be on, a market that's always going to be a bullish market. It's just not going to happen. And this is the first time, because even in the 80s, it was never as good as it was for 2 years. So people have to understand that that time's over. People have their other things going on in life now. They can go out. Nobody has to wear a mask anymore. You know,
Right.
entertainment dollars go elsewhere.
There was, that's why I said earlier in this episode, I really wish that we could have like this crystal ball to kind of show us where things would be at today in the hobby if the panda didn't happen, because we know like there was some shenanigans driving a lot of the values and everything, and there was like you said, people were at home, they weren't out, doing things. A lot of people weren't working. There was free money coming in, and you could attribute all of that to some of it, but we also know that a lot of it was shenanigans going on.
Yeah.
I would like to see where things would be at today. I think we would still be healthy. I think it still would have grown. I think people would have still had some regained interest in it, but I don't know that it would be so out of whack. Like, I don't know. I think even though cards might still be up without the pandemic, I think people might be less scared because they've seen those fall offs. Like, they've seen the Jordan go from 800,000 down to 150,000 or whatever it's
Yeah,
at.
but how many people can buy those though, Brandon? That's the whole thing. How many of us can go afford to go buy that card? So why are we basing how we collect on how much the PSA 10 Jordan is doing? I don't own a single one. I own 10 nines, and I'm happy
there's
as
a
can be
reason
with
for
those.
that. But and I had this discussion with somebody earlier. So, are you going out to buy a PSA 10 Jordan? No. Are you going out
Hell
to
no.
buy an SGC 9.5 Mickey Mantle? No. Are you going out to buy another 50, 60, $100,000 card? Name any of them? No. But why does that affect us, us guys down lower in the stream? Because the hype that is created off of those sales is flashed out on CNN and ESPN and everything else. And then that brings the flood of people into the market. So although we're not
Yep.
in the market to buy a PSA 10 Michael Jordan, it still affects us because it drives everything. It's that crap rolls downhill, momentum where
Sure.
the increase in interest, the increase in demand, and the increase of thought that, oh my God, well, I could buy this guy today and he might become the next Michael Jordan. That
Mm-hmm.
it brings a lot of newness, a lot of people that don't have knowledge or experience in the hobby, and it's driven up. It's part of the reason the wax prices are up, because now look, you got a Justin Herbert selling for $1.8 million. Is 99.9% of the people in the hobby paying $1.8 million for Justin Herbert? Hell no, not a single day on earth. But that then creates a price hype in his optics, in his Don
Right.
Russes and everything else,
Right.
because
There's a
it's like,
trickle
oh
down.
my God, Justin Herbert.
Right. The trickle down effect. I mean, I
Right.
understand that. It's no different. Like my mantle. After the sale, my mantle increased by $100,000. Was I happy?
That's
Okay, great. But I'm not selling it. It's mine. It's not going anywhere.
right.
You know what I mean? So to me, it doesn't affect me. It does nothing for me. That's the difference with a collector. The money doesn't mean anything to us, because the only reason why the money means anything is because that's how we acquire the cards. Because a lot of people, they don't like to trade because they feel like they're going to be on the short end of the stick, so they feel that getting paper money in return is a better option. Anytime that I have done anything where, like, I and I probably shouldn't be giving this information out, but I'm going to. The LeBron that I had, the gold refractor rookie. Okay, I didn't take that in cash. I ended up taking that in gold and silver value. I ended up taking that back, and I'm up 45% on my gold and silver. Not digitally. I took it in hand, for that card when I sold it. And I'm, like I said, I'm up 45% on that value right now. Now that's something that I could take and sell, which I did, of course, and I put them into rental properties. I ended up buying 2 rental properties because of those, those cards I had. And it's just, those are those wins that you do have, but those wins don't come every day, and that's the problem, that it is being sold to everybody that you can win like that every day.
And
Don't
that's
expect those
that's why
wins.
I mentioned, but that's why I mentioned like the Jordan and why I wish we could see what the hobby would be like today, because I think there's a lot of fear baked in with all of the losses. Like people
Hmm.
came in and they dumped a bunch of money into this stuff, and things are up pre-pandemic still, but a lot of people lost a lot of money buying at the peak, at the hype. And although
Yeah,
we might not be out there hunting the $800,000 PSA 10 Jordan, that affected the entire scope of the market, right? It,
sure.
people attribute cards and they compare them with stocks, but you can't, because if
No,
Amazon goes bonkers, it's not affecting Baskin Robbins, right? But
right.
in sports cards, a Jordan going up could then affect Luca or Zion, because everybody's then, well, this is going to be the next Jordan card. They're chasing that
Yep.
next copy. So they're not attributed in the same way. Hype driven in sports cards can affect from the top to the bottom. And that's where
Yep.
I said I would like to see, without that fear of those losses being induced, where the market would be today, like how strong the hobby would be. And one affliction to this would be the wax prices. I don't think wax boxes would be where they are today if we didn't have that influx where people were spending $10,000 on a Prism card of some rookie or whatever. So
Yep.
Mac Jones comes out at $150,000 for a 101. Well, of course, Panini's going to be like, we can sell these boxes for $1,500.
Yep.
They've 10x'd in the matter of what, 3 years or whatever it's been, and
Yep.
that's just that. I don't think we would be there. I could see maybe a Prism box being 300 today if all that wasn't baked in it. And now, again, as you said, it shouldn't affect us guys down who are normal collectors, but it does, because I can't even go out and buy Topps Chrome because of all of the hype affliction that has increased the value of wax. I'm not going to sit there and risk my money to go spend the price of the wax today. So it did
Hmm.
indirectly affect me in a direct manner, because it took away a lot of what I enjoy in the hobby.
Yeah.
So that's why I said I would
Yeah.
like to see the hobby without that fear baked in, without that loss baked in there,
But
just to see
you
where it
know
would
the
be.
the kind of a problem that we're having though is that people are comparing our market to other markets in the world, and our market is not the stock market. Our
Nope.
market, we don't have enough people in let's call it a market, okay? Because I mean, it's kind of stupid to even call it a market, but because everybody else wants to, call it a market, we're going to call it a market. There's not enough people in our space for it to be a market. It is a hobby. You know what I mean? Once it gets to the status of a stock market, then you could say, hey, yes, this is a real market. Everybody and anybody is invested in this. Their 401ks are actually affected by what happens in the card market. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how many
It,
people would
it
be jumping out of 10-story buildings and stuff when when their 401k hit the absolute bottom and stuff, when with all these numbers, if they were all back behind sports cards, it's
yeah, like
crazy.
I I I always say I do sports cards because I don't do stocks, and I don't compare the
Hmm.
two. I don't put any
Yeah.
weight on the two of them. You know, the only similarities is if the way I felt that sports cards should be done, which is I feel that performance should be more attributed to card prices. Instead, we have hype attributed to the card prices more than performance. Stocks are based off of performances, but it's financial numbers which are
Which
shared
are
with the public.
manipulated. They're
Right,
manipulated as
right.
well. That market is a
but
manipulated market. I mean, it's no
but
different.
at the same time, like I just said, Amazon shooting up in price one day isn't meaning that Baskin Robbins is going up And that's what you see a lot with, like, sports cards. And we have,
Mhm.
Vintage, like, imagine, what would you consider a vintage stock, right? You know, we
I
got
well,
ultra
one
modern
of my
stocks and vintage stocks.
right, yeah. My pick for your, is an IBM. That's IBM or Apple or something like that. There's your vintage stock. What's your new stock? Amazon. That's.
Well,
I mean, it's just it makes no sense that we're comparing the stock market to the sports card market. It isn't.
yeah,
It's
well,
not
and then
even
you have to
close.
go, what is the PSA stock, and what is the BGS stock and the SGC stock, and
Oh my
in the
god.
stock market, because you can have the
Oh
same
god.
cards with different slabs on them and the value. So again,
Yeah.
I always think it's funny too when you compare the two of them. But
Yeah.
anyway, this has been a good topic. I appreciate. I'm glad that well, I would normally say I'm glad that you enjoyed the industry summit. I apologize.
No, I
I have
no,
no reason to apologize, but
yeah,
um,
I enjoyed seeing the guys again and saying hello, to people, and it's always good to see people and see that they're in good health, and everyone's happy and all and stuff like that. I just wish that this was more based to the collector, because I think there's a real big untapped potential in this hobby that is just not touched on, and that's the collector at heart. Because if you do, the money's going to come. It always does. I mean, we've always had money in sports cards. Money's always been in the world somehow or another. So just relax. Stop trying to play the fast game. I mean,
yeah. But anyway, it's been a great
I'm s- I,
conversation.
I'm sweating, Bubbles. I'm literally sweating over here because I'm so
Oh,
stressed
because
out over this weekend.
oh, I thought you meant because of the heat. I was going to say it's kind of chilly here. It's in the 50s
No, no,
because we've had all
I
the
got so
rain and
frustrated
everything.
with
But
this weekend.
yeah, I could kind of tell, and especially when you messaged me earlier, I didn't know if you were going to be able to record today, so I didn't know if I was going to have to fly solo or find a fill-in. But you were like, "No, I want to talk about the industry summit." So I was like, "All right, well, let's see how this goes." So
Yeah,
I'm glad you could share that with everybody. Give kind of a rundown of how that show or conference or whatever you want to call it is.
yeah.
I get that I don't need to be on a plane heading to Vegas for the next industry summit.
No,
It doesn't sound like it would do me a damn bit of good. So,
nope.
anyway, I'm glad you could share that with everybody. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. We are on 19. Next, the Wednesday episode will be number 20. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, hope you all have had a great weekend. Hope your football teams won. Hope your baseball teams won. Hockey will be starting up soon, and NBA's they're doing camp. So fun time in the sports world, and yeah, hope you all
And
have a
I'm sorry.
wonderful Monday.
Yeah, and
And
I'm sorry
as
to
always,
all
guys.
my. Hold on real quick. I'm sorry to my industry buddies, but I apologize. I had to call a spade a spade. So
Well, there you have it, guys. At least you know he wasn't on here putting makeup on it and saying it's the greatest show on earth.
no.
He said his feelings, and I guess it's still your choice if you want to ever attend it. But there you go. You have someone's opinion who was there. So, but as always, guys, thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful Monday. We will catch you on Wednesday.
Thank you.